Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Slip Safety Show. My guest today is Charlie Turner of V12 Footwear, which is a family-owned business that manufactures safety footwear. So Charlie knows all about the footwear part of slips, trips and falls, or the H in the Chimes model that we have developed, so H for heel. And so we talk about what do you need to do in terms of specifying anti-slip footwear or safety footwear more broadly. How would you go about doing it? What are some of the innovations that are happening in the world? How do we go into kind of positioning and selling the benefits of proactive risk management in the field of slips and trips too? Charlie, as you'll see, is definitely on the same mission as me, which is to make the world a safer, cleaner and more hygienic place. And so I think you'll get some great insight from him in this episode. If you enjoy it, please do tell your friends and family about it, and maybe colleagues. Perhaps family's a bit strong, although you never know. Some of your family might be interested. But please do share the show with other people. We're really keen to try and get this positive message out to as many people as we can, and to that end, adding a tick next to the subscription box on whichever platform it is that you're consuming this would also be really beneficial to help spread the word. So with that, let's get into my conversation with Charlie Turner from V12 Footwear. Charlie, welcome to the Slip Safety Show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I thought I might start with how we met in person, because it's a bit of a funny story. So we were connected on LinkedIn and we chatted a bit, and then we were both sitting in the audience at a health and safety event. Was it the NEC or somewhere like that?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
And we both sort of looked at each other and we were like, "Are you who I think you are?" And it turned out that that was the case. So yeah, it's quite funny. But do you want to start by giving the audience just a bit of an overview about you personally, and then we'll get on a bit into the business?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of what I do and what we do, so work for a company called V12 Footwear. So we've been in the industry for just over 20 years now. And we specifically design, develop and build our own safety footwear under the brand of V12. That is, I've been with the company now, it will be in June, it will be 10 years, and currently I'm marketing director for V12 Footwear. There are three specific areas that we focus on. Won't go into too much detail, but the most important one to start with is comfort.
Yeah.
Boots have to be comfortable. The next one is safety. They have to be safe. We're in the safety game. And that can be everything from toe caps to slips, and we'll speak more about that, I'm sure, in a moment.
Yeah.
And then the final one is durability. We need to ensure that it could be the best product, but if it's only going to last a week, don't have a very sustainable model, and it certainly doesn't bring benefit to the consumer.
Yeah.
So those are kind of three pillars, if you like.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I I can vouch for the comfort because I was on site a couple of months ago at a development in London in Canary Wharf, Berkeley Homes site, and they had your boots there. So I was sporting a nice pair of size 12s as I was traipsing up and down the stairs to go and look at a bathroom floor that needed some additional slip resistance on it. So yes, I can certainly vouch for the comfort side of things. So how did you get involved in the business then?
So it's a family-run business.
Okay.
So it was founded by my dad and my uncle. It happens to be that the company and our heritage in footwear goes back probably about 3 generations in the Turner family. So my grandfather, my great-grandfather, at that point it was men's fashion shoes.
Yeah.
But we've developed in the sort of early 90s, mid 90s, developed into safety footwear. I've grown up with boots, if that makes sense. So it's kind of in the DNA, it's in the blood.
Yeah.
And it's something which sadly is also coming through to our oncoming generations. And sort of passion for footwear and for boots is definitely something which goes with the family name. So that's really how we got into it.
Yeah. I grew up in Northamptonshire, which is kind of quite famous for footwear.
Absolutely.
So like Dr. Martens, for example, is from there, and quite a few of these kind of higher end footwear boutiques. So I think a lot of people in that neck of the woods, have a kind of passion for footwear as well. So
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
Okay, so when it comes to footwear, then one of the questions I was going to ask was what are the main criteria that people should be choosing them upon? But I think you've given us that. But I mean, in terms of a process then of going through from a client perspective, let's say I was I don't know, operating a restaurant or a factory, or I was setting up a building site. How would you recommend that people kind of go through that process of choosing which footwear they should be specifying for their staff?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So essentially, how do you choose your boots? That is the first thing. I'm referencing back to what I just mentioned about comfort. Is fit defines the comfort essentially. So if your boots don't fit, they won't be comfortable. So the first point which I would start at would be, and we usually do this through gender, so male or female, we have anatomically different structured feet.
Oh,
So
right, I
it's
didn't know
really
that.
important that we've launched a women's range, which is specifically a different shape. All the products look the same actually between our men's and our women's range, but it's simply because there is a different bone structure and a different shape. And if you have a woman wearing a men's boot, you'll get incredible slipping, blisters in the heel, and all of these things simply because it doesn't fit. So definitely that would be the starting point. Then there would be a number of things we would look at, and probably the second most important thing I would say would be the surface, so the flooring. So what are you working on? What are you walking on? Because your footwear is your only contact with the ground.
Yeah.
Like we like using car tire analogies. Car tires are your only contact with the road. So it's really important that you get good car tires. We say the same about footwear.
Yeah.
So the sole unit obviously correlates with the floor surface, or needs to correlate. So for example, if you're working in mud, and what we would call that splits into two different types. You have natural surfaces, so the likes of mud and grass and things like that.
Yeah.
Or you have man-made. So that's like ceramic tiles, Kennedy grating, scaffold board, all of those things. Generally, you can split into those two groups. With the natural surfaces, you want more of your tractor tire, as we call it. So you're more rugged, more open lug, so it doesn't get clogged up. Whereas on the man-made surfaces, you want something which is a flatter profile, lots and lots of channels for dispersing any liquid or contamination there might be on the surface. And that's more like your car tire, more like your sort of racing tire.
Yeah.
If you like. So it would go fit, and then it would go surface. Then you would look at safety requirements. So what is my risk at work? Do I have a risk of dropping things on my toes? Do I have a risk of standing on nails? In that case, I'd need a toe cap and I'd need a protective midsole. So there's a number of different aspects like that. You want to go through and check your kind of, it's essentially like a bit of a risk assessment. And then from there, you would then go down to, is there then specifics? So are you working in a particularly hot environment, or is it a particularly wet environment? You may want waterproof if you're all day in puddles or in water or in rain, or you're pressure washing or doing something like that. Absolutely want to have waterproof. And then finally, it comes down to style and price. So what's within your, and what I would just say about price is really important, and I would say this, is about getting cost in use.
Yeah.
So you can buy very cheap safety boots, but what we try and focus on is how much does it cost you per day to have those boots. So if you buy a pair of boots for £25 and you get through 3 pairs in a year, suddenly 75 quid you could actually afford to be spending on one pair of boots that are more comfortable, safer, and cost you exactly the same amount of money. So that hopefully gives a bit of an overview of the kind of how you would choose your boots. Hopefully
I think that's really useful actually, because I think and it brings out the point that I often make around slip safety, which is actually there's a lot more detail than people might otherwise think. So you can go to any sort of workwear shop and say, oh, I want some safety shoes or safety boots, and they'll just pass you whatever there is. But actually how rigorous a process is that, and how how much quality do those products have, and how comfortable are they, and so on and so forth. You don't really know. So I think, it's always important to try to encourage people to go through the kind of correct process. Would you normally then give people do a sort of trial run or something like that? How would you, let's say I rang up and said, I've been looking into it, I'm interested. How can we, could we trial some, could we buy some to give to a few people? How would that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So where we're looking at, particularly where you're purchasing for your workforce, or you're providing for a group or a number of people, it's really important that you trial. So one of the things the health and safety executive actually say that people should be doing is they shouldn't be choosing footwear, or any PPE for that matter, from a catalogue or website or a salesperson alone. As much as you'll be able to get some good guidance and advice, it's really important that you get, we usually say, a percentage of the workforce. It doesn't have to be many, but it simply is just making sure that in the actual environment, because a certain amount can be done in testing, but it's all in a laboratory. The important bit is when people actually get the boots on and they go out there and they're kicking bricks and they're doing all sorts of different things, which you're doing a day-to-day activity. That is really important, that you get feedback and that they perform, and then it's safe to roll them out. So that's how we usually operate.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think good to do the due diligence, and the fact that you guys support that kind of demonstrates that you're professional, which obviously perhaps not everybody in the marketplace might be as professional as that, shall we say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing as well, just for any individual who's obviously buying, is there's a trial option isn't usually there, because it's not like we say sort of, have the boots for a month, let us know, and if they work, pay for them. We'd love to be able to work that somehow. Definitely a project we can work on. But what is important with our footwear is we use what we call our test pilots. So every boot we develop, we actually put it out into the marketplace prior to its launch.
Okay.
So what we do with it is we'll develop a certain number of samples. We will then talk directly with people who, it may be someone who's on track side, it may be someone who's in a factory, it may be someone who's on an oil rig. We make sure we get them boots, we get feedback so we can make any amends and make sure basically that it's fit for purpose, so that it's being used in the application. We've had feedback from people. So hopefully there is confidence with people buying our boots. If they're buying them for themselves, there's confidence that a group of people like themselves have already tested and proved this product, and it isn't just, hasn't been designed in a dark room.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So in terms of like slip resistance then, I mean, how important is that, would you say, overall, or is that more, in your experience, important for particular niche markets that you're selling into?
Yeah, I think generally across all of our industries, of which we have a number, but it is the most important aspect. Often actually what we're saying to people is you're more likely to slip up, and there's data to prove this, than you are to drop something on your toes. So as much as it's really important, and we would never minimize obviously the safety aspects in terms of toe cap, midsole protection, the slip resistance is actually the most important. And we're just launching a micro campaign, if you like, now, which particularly in this time, which is called The Facts Remain. Okay. So there's a huge amount of change in the marketplace, but actually the facts still remain that 1/3 of all accidents in the workplace are from slips. That's 10,000 major accidents every year, and 90% of those result in broken bones. So more important than ever, if you've got people at work and critical workers, the last thing you want to happen is for a slip accident. So I would say slip resistance is the most important, and that's actually why we design and build our own sole units. We don't use third-party ones or standard ones.
Yeah, and I think certainly in some of these industries that you guys operate in, there's not much else you can do realistically in terms of what's controllable and what isn't. I don't know if you've seen the kind of the Chimes model that we've come up with, which sets out the 6 things that you can look at that contribute towards a slip, and obviously the heel element, the foot, is a key part of that. But that revolves around what's controllable and what isn't. And obviously, if you're working externally on grass or whatever it might be, there's not really much you can control about the surface. There's nothing you can control about the environment. So it all comes down really in a practical sense to the footwear.
That's a really important point, and we've tried to get that across to people. There are particular industries like the utilities where you may have engineers going into different people's properties or workplaces, or facilities management, particularly important because the usual sort of hierarchy of control, as they call it, would be, I think you would usually start with sort of contamination control, cleaning, flooring, and then footwear. Well, in that instance, there's often, if you're going into someone else's premises, you can't control the contamination. You've no control over what's on the floor. You've no control over the cleaning of it. You've no control over the flooring. You can't say, let's put down some more grippy flooring here.
Yeah, we won't deliver to your pub until you've changed the floor.
Yeah. So in that instance, actually, that's where footwear then becomes the most important, because that is what they can control. And having the most slip-resistant footwear for the surfaces is really important. And I just caveat that with the most slip-resistant footwear for the surfaces, because it's not necessarily the most slip-resistant, if that makes sense.
No, I mean, well, of course it makes sense. It makes sense to me, but I think it's important to underscore for the audience who maybe don't have. I mean, you've got more technical knowledge on footwear than me, but as you said earlier, the friction provided by the sole is going to depend on the type of surface that it's walking on and the type of contamination that's present. So, you might have a ceramic tile in a kitchen. You could have the same ceramic tile in a swimming pool, let's say, and it may be, I'm not certain, but it may be that you need different footwear to deal with a different contamination. But if you've got a different surface entirely, then you are going to be needing different soles.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is important to, again, it's simple when you break it down and you think about car tires, and you think about, what their function is. So a car tire has lots of channels in it, and that's to push away any water or any contaminant that may be on the road, disperse that to avoid the car from aquaplaning. Essentially, that's what a sole should do as well. The sole of your boot, of your shoe, the first thing it needs to do is it needs to cut through the contamination, because if it doesn't, it will aquaplane.
Yeah.
Once it's cut through that, then it needs to be of a certain compound, of a certain grip, to be able to then grip on the particular surface that is underneath that contamination. So that's really important.
Yeah, no, definitely. And what sort of numbers or classifications or ratings or standards should people be aware of and looking for when they're choosing footwear? And again, it might differ for different industries and different environments, but could you give a flavour for what people should be looking for if they're going out and looking to buy some footwear?
Yeah, absolutely, that's good, because there is European standards. We're still at the moment controlled by European standards. So we have, within safety footwear, there is SRA, SRB and SRC. Now, SRC is actually if you can comply with both the SRA standard and the SRB standard. Just to really briefly explain those, SRA is where you have a tile with soapy water on it. And SRB test is where they use like a steel kind of sheet with it's like a glycerol, like an oil on there. So it's obviously much more difficult to pass. Now, those standards have got varying degrees of ease or otherwise of passing. And sometimes you see footwear in the marketplace, unfortunately, is marked SRC, which you really struggle to understand how it's managed to achieve that. There is universal standards, but there is also slight variances we've proved in the past between testing houses and different authorities. So really important that you use them as a guide, but you don't use them as the kind of ultimate. The Health and Safety Laboratory have also come up with another test, which is quite a good one, I believe, which is called the GRIP scheme. So again, what they've actually sought to do is, rather than the standard test uses entirely a mechanical process. So it's a mechanical arm that comes down with a boot on it, the surface moves underneath it, and then it establishes a coefficient of friction. With the HSL test, they actually have a person in a harness walking on a surface. so that it actually resembles a proper gait cycle of a human. So it's much more nearer to the actual in use function of the boot.
Yeah.
So those would be the two, and they have a star rating. Those would be the two kind of official ones to look out for. But I would just say that look out and see if there's any other information on the product as well. For example, we've actually done testing on specific surfaces.
Right.
So our IGS sole unit, we test on scaffold board and Kennedy grating. So where that is relevant for people, absolutely look at see if there's any other surfaces that have been tested on by the manufacturer to ensure that obviously it's the right fit for what you're walking on.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And as you say, use the testing numbers as a guide for your kind of minimum safety. But then obviously there's all these other factors like the comfort and the durability that you need to, and of course the commercial side of things that you need to take into account as well.
Absolutely, and I think is the health and safety executives say that you could have the most slip resistant boot, but if it's not comfortable, you won't get people wearing it. So
people won't wear it. Yeah. I mean, I've been into kitchens, and other environments before, and seen 60-70% of the staff wearing the shoes that they should be wearing theoretically, and the rest not. Why not? Well, it's not comfortable, or it's worn away, or I've forgotten to order it. You know what I mean? And there's always an excuse. But I think a lot of it would come down, in my experience, to that comfort factor. Because if you're asking somebody to stand on their feet, as the types of people that would require safety footwear typically are doing for 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hours a day, then you need to be giving them something comfortable to wear. Otherwise, they're just not going to wear it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, fully agree.
Yeah. So in terms of looking, I think that's a really good overview of going through how people should be choosing. In terms of looking at your industry as a whole, or anything that you guys are developing specifically within V12, are there any interesting trends or innovations that might be worth just touching on and bringing the audience up to speed about?
Yeah, that's really good, because there are a number of trends, if you like, in the industry. So in safety footwear, particularly there is some of the things we're getting asked for at the moment, and some of the things we've developed of recent are women's footwear. So as I mentioned right at the start, it's making sure that there is a increased movement in getting more women into the particular industries that we mainly deal with, which tend to be on the construction or manufacturing, or some of those which typically have been more male dominated.
Yeah.
So that's really important, making sure we've got true fitting women's footwear. There is women's footwear out there, which we call it the kind of pink it and shrink it, where simply they have taken, is still built on a men's last, or is not on the appropriate fit. And sorry, last is the foot shape shoes are made on, for anyone who will not understand that. But it's really important that it fits people. So women's footwear is definitely a trend. We're also seeing a trend towards vegan, obviously. It's very, very large in the news, but we are developing, and we now have a range of products which are, we call them vegan friendly. So they are made from man-made materials, rather than typically there's a lot of leather in footwear production. So those are kind of the two main trends. The other trend that we're seeing, which we're trying to help and educate people towards, is kind of underspecking or overspecking products. So it's really important that people are able to get the right specification. There is a bit, unfortunately, instances where we've been in and helped people done an audit of a factory, for example, and found where people are actually putting in the top of the range in terms of on paper spec. They may be paying over the odds, and there may be unnecessary elements in the boot which make up the price. And so they can be actually, for example, there may be an environment where they've specified S3, SRC, which is a safety boot standard, which means it has a midsole and a toe cap. Now, there may be no danger of them having any standing on any form of sharp or nail or piece of glass or anything like that. And all they're doing is paying over the odds for it. So we can prove some real value in going in and helping people where they may have under-spec or over-spec products.
Yeah.
I think that's really probably one of the biggest shifts.
Yeah, that's a huge bugbear of mine when it comes to the flooring side of this as well, because when I first got involved in this industry sort of 10 odd years ago, showing my age like you, Charlie, the understanding about the pendulum test, for example, was very limited. So people were still using ABC ratings and R ratings and so on and so forth. Nowadays, most architects kind of have an idea about the pendulum, but they kind of misunderstand the point of the 36 plus. So they will say, right, well, if 36 plus is kind of the pass, even though there's no such thing as a pass, we'll go for a 55 plus in the wet because then we're well above. But that just causes all sorts of other problems, because it means you've got a very, very grippy surface that's hard to clean, hard to maintain, and actually it's probably going to become quite slippery quite quickly, whereas had they started life with a surface with a 38 or a 39 PTV, you could probably maintain it at about 36. So I think a little bit of information can sometimes be a dangerous thing.
Yeah, and there is such a thing as stiction as well. So this is where something is too grippy, and you'll probably be well aware of that. And we get it sometimes with footwear in particular environments. You can actually get it where it can potentially pose a trip hazard because the boot is too grippy and the floor is too grippy, and the combination of it means that people are catching their feet as they're walking. The only other trend we're really seeing is a massive push towards foot health and foot comfort. So people are becoming more and more aware. Occupational health in a lot of organizations are starting to realize that the basis of having a good sound structural body, your hips, your knees, your back, everything can be affected by your posture, the way you stand, or whether you're comfortable or not, and whether your feet have the right support. So we're having quite a bit, and we've just developed some custom insoles. So there's a series of insoles which will depend on your arch height. We're able to identify people's arch heights, give them the correct support, so that we're distributing pressure evenly across their feet, rather than being concentrated in areas.
So taking a more personalised approach.
Yeah, but it also complies with the safety rating, because sadly, in a lot of the factories that we do audits in, we'll see people have put their own insoles into boots.
Right.
That actually negates the safety standard, because the safety boot has to be tested, the toe cap impact has to be tested with an insole in, to make sure that obviously it's got the clearance so that your toes don't get crushed under the certain weight that's applied. Well, if someone goes and puts in their own insole, it may be thicker, they've just reduced the impact zone, and they could be putting themselves at risk. And certainly if there was an accident, there would be absolutely no comeback for them in form of any claim or get any financial support out of the accident.
Okay. Speaking of claims, have you? I mean, one of the challenges that I see with footwear in certain industries is that obviously, if you're providing footwear as PPE, then the company needs to pick up the cost of it. Whereas if you're not, then you don't have to pick up the cost of it necessarily. Have you seen many examples of that going wrong? As in, it's a kitchen and people really should be having footwear, but the company has decided that they didn't want to spend the money, and that's caused some severe accidents, and there's some repercussions from that at all?
Yeah, we haven't. That kind of thing doesn't get hugely publicised, unfortunately. And there is a few good examples on the HSE website of that type of thing, where there was one particular one where the footwear wasn't provided. I think the sole was hanging off. It was a worn pair of boots, and that did come back on the company, because it is an employer's legal duty to be providing the correct PPE. I would just caution everyone who in their workplace they do have to use PPE. I would just caution them to just make sure they're in control of it. Make sure they know what people are wearing. They know what safety rating boots people are wearing. And we're trying to make sure people are not just letting their staff go and buy their own footwear as well, because you've completely lost control then of your footwear. And the whole contribution, sometimes people do a bit of a okay, we'll only pay up to X point. If you want a better boot, you can go and buy it yourself.
Yeah.
Again, you're just losing control. You're better to pay a little bit more and retain the control so that you're completely covered, and also your staff are safer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, my experience of people like facilities management companies is that they will roll this out and do it properly because they kind of build it all into their pricing. And albeit that's an industry that operates on thin margins, all of that stuff is built in, so it gets done and they follow it through and make sure it happens. Whereas people like restaurateurs and so on, that's where I, in my experience, have seen, gaps, shall we say, where they probably should be doing something, but actually because they've got 500 sites and 20 employees per site and they have a turnover of staff of 40% a year, the bill for doing it would be, very large. But equally, as you say, they should be doing it from a legal and a moral perspective.
Yeah, I think absolutely it's mitigating risk at the end of the day. And there is potential for some of these things to be able to get insurance benefits as well. Is a bit like if you have car insurance and you do a like a safe driving course or something like that, you're able to get reduction in insurance. If you can prove that you've put in, due diligence, you've done your homework, you've got your people in the right footwear to mitigate risk, then in theory there could be some potential to be able to go and get reduction of insurance costs on that sort of thing. So it's just looking a bit outside of the box and not being too fixed on the actual price, as it were.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's also things called risk management bursaries, which insurers will allocate towards improving the risk profile of their clients as well. So I've certainly had cases where we've gone in and done a bit of consulting, and one of the recommendations has been that they should be looking at footwear, and the insurance companies have contributed towards that cost, not 100%, but they've put something towards it. So that can be very helpful. So okay, well look, thank you very much for your time. Let's start wrapping up. So we're in some sort of incredible times, and I mean incredible in the literal sense. So I'm keen to focus on some positive stuff. So if I could give you a genie in a bottle, but not with 3 wishes, just with one, and you could have one wish that was something around your industry, so to improve the way that it worked or something like that. I'm not going to allow you to say that everybody would buy only V12 footwear, but something that would help maybe to raise the profile or improve safety or whatever it might be. What could you come up with on that point, do you think?
Probably, and I'm probably sitting here from a marketing perspective now, but my wish would be that every single person who wears our boots and experiences the comfort of them tells their friends. We have a large number of people who wear our boots, and a huge number of people I speak to personally who they love the comfort of them. They think they're amazing. A lot of people, our business is largely built on repeat business, so usually we will have a customer for life once we get them into V12s, and my wish would be that people would just tell their friends about them, make their friends comfortable, and just spread the word about the products that we've got.
I wonder I think people are always inclined to complain more vociferously than praise. I wonder whether there's anything you could do around, I don't know, there must be some sort of clever social media thing you could maybe do around taking some photographs of the footwear, or I don't know. We'll take that offline and think about it another day.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there is a number of different things that we're looking into from a marketing perspective to try and encourage that. But I think also boots are such a conversational item. I've found it in the past, if you're in a room of people you're not necessarily familiar with or know, footwear is a great subject. And everyone can talk about their experience of whether they've had comfortable shoes, uncomfortable shoes, what brands they like, what brands they don't like. So I just
and most people have a slip story, as I like to put it. Either themselves, we've all almost slipped, I'm sure, and some people have slipped, or friends or family or whatever it might be. So there's certainly a rich variety of topics that you can get into around footwear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks very much. Before we go, do you want to give the audience some plugs or some links or some social media handles or whatever it might be? What's the best way for people to reach out to you guys or to learn more about what you're doing if they're interested, having heard what you've said today?
Yeah, absolutely. So if people are interested, our website is v12footwear.com, and our handles are at v12footwear. So please follow us, continue to watch our journey, look and get updates from products, competitions we run, etc. And I'd just like to say big thank you to Christian for inviting me on this call today.
Pleasure. Charlie Turner, thank you very much. Have a good day.
Good. Thank you.